All right, so in this video, I want to show you how to listen for events. But first of all, what are events? So the official MDN explanation is that events are actions or occurrences that happen in the system you are programming, which the system tells you about, so your code can react to them. So that's kind of an overkill of an explanation. Basically, an event is just when something happens, okay, or an action. And that could be anything from the web page loading to clicking on an element, typing into a text field, hovering over an element, submitting a form, closing a window, dragging an element, resizing an element, etc., etc. So just about anything is an event, and you can listen for those events. So that's what I want to show you how to do now. So I'm going to close that up, and I just have our good old shopping list UI here with an empty JavaScript file. And there's a few ways that we can add an event listener onto an element. So the first way I'm going to show you is not recommended. I don't think any JavaScript developer would recommend it because it's not flexible. It can also pose a security risk. And that is to put the listener in the HTML file as an attribute. So for example, this clear button, that's what I want to work with. So we could put in here an on-click attribute, and then I could actually put a JavaScript expression right in here. Like I could say alert and say clear. And now if I come down here and click the button, I'm going to get an alert box with clear. All right, now obviously you can only put so much JavaScript in here, so you could actually put a function like on-click, or let's call it on-clear. And as long as I have my script file linked to my HTML here, I can create a function called onClear, and then I can alert, and we'll say clear items. All right, so if I come over here and I click, again, we get an alert box with clear items. But again, this is not recommended. You don't want to have your HTML cluttered up with what are called inline event listeners. So we're going to get rid of that. And then I'm going to show you the second way, which is to use a JavaScript event listener. So with this, we can select our element. Let's see, I'm going to keep the on clear here, but I want to comment it out. But I'm going to bring in the clear button because I'm going to use it in a few different places. So let's say clear btn. We're going to select it with query selector, and it has an ID of clear. All right, so what we can do to add an event listener within our JavaScript is to say clear button, and then just do a dot on click. And on click is one of many event listeners. And then you would set that to a function, and then do what you want in here. So let's do we'll do an alert. So we'll say alert and clear items. Okay, so if I come over here, I click, and I get my alert box, and I didn't have to do anything in the HTML. So that's the second way. The third way is what I would recommend. It's the most modern way, and it's what we're going to do in this for the rest of this course, and that is to use the add event listener method. And what that does is it just allows you to do just that. You take an HTML element or a DOM element, and you add a listener for a specific type of event. So let's comment this out for the moment, and let me just say add event listener. So we would once again just take the clear button or whatever we want to put the listener on and simply say add event listener. And then this takes in two arguments. It's going to take in the type of event, which in this case I want it to be a click, and then it takes in a callback function. So I'll just put an anonymous function in here, and then I'll do an alert, and we'll say clear items. Save that, and if I come over here and click, I get the same thing. All right, gives us the same result. Now you can shorten this up. We can go ahead and turn this into an arrow function. So we can do that, and since it's just a one-liner, we can even get rid of the curly braces like that, and that should still work. All right, so this is what I would recommend. And another kind of advantage with this is you can have as many event listeners as you want on the same event. And let me just show you, if I uncomment this and then I copy it, and then let's say I want to do I want another event listener on the clear button, and this time I'm going to just console.log clear items. All right, and I'm going to comment this out for a minute. So we have two event listeners, same event, same element, but they do two different things. So now I'll come down here and let's open our console and let's click, and you'll see we get our console log, but I never get that alert. Okay, if I comment this second one out, then we should get the alert. Now with add event listener, we can have as many as we want. So I'm going to just copy this down, and let's see, instead of on the second one, instead of alert, let's do console.log. And now if I click this, you'll see we do get the alert, and then once I clear that up, then it console logs. All right, and the reason that it doesn't run at the same time, like you don't see the log at the same time, is because an alert is a blocking operation. And I'll talk more about that when we get into synchronous versus asynchronous code, but just know that an alert it's synchronous and it's blocking, so nothing is going to happen until that's cleared up. All right, but it does run both of them. So that's an advantage of add event listener. Now for these, we put in just an anonymous function, but we can use a named function, such as onClear. So I'm going to just uncomment that, and I'll just comment one of these. And then instead of passing in this arrow function as the second argument, let's pass in the onClear function. Now, when you do this, you don't want to put parentheses. If I do that, it's just going to execute. Okay, the function gets invoked because we're using parentheses. So you just want to pass in the callback. You want to pass in the function name. So that way it only fires off when you fire the event. All right, now there is a remove event listener method, and you don't have to use it every time you add an event listener. Where you do want to use it is when you have an element that you're removing from the DOM, like we learned about the remove method, remove child. If you're doing that, then it's a good idea to remove the event listener first. So what I want to do is call remove event listener, but I want to call it 5 seconds after the browser load, after the page loads. And I'm going to use a function called set timeout to do that, which we haven't used yet. So it might be a little confusing, but we will get into set timeout, which is an asynchronous JavaScript function, and we'll get into that later. But basically it takes in two things, a function, and then it also takes in the number of milliseconds that I want to wait to fire this function off. And I'm going to say 5,000, which is 5 seconds. And then in here is where I want to remove the event listener. So I'll say clear btn dot remove event listener. And what I'm going to pass into this is the event, which is click. And then I also need the reference function, which is onClear. Okay, and which we have up here. Okay, so that's the function being passed into add event listener, also the function being passed into remove add event listener. So if I save that, you'll see that this works fine. I'm clicking it. It's the box is popping up. But once we get to 5 seconds, you can see I can no longer click it because that event listener has been removed. Now the last thing I want to show you before we make this actually function and clear these items is that we can trigger an event programmatically. So if I wanted to have my script actually do the click instead of coming over here and clicking, I can do that. So I'm going to actually use set timeout again because I want this to happen after a certain amount of time. I'm going to comment this set timeout. And once again, we pass in a function and also the length of time. We'll do 5 seconds. And I'm going to take the clear button, and then from here I can do .click like that. Okay, so if I save that and then we just wait 5 seconds, there we go. We see the alert box. Okay, so we have this event, this click event, and here we're waiting 5 seconds, and then we're basically clicking this just from within our script rather than coming over to the browser and clicking the button. All right, because there might be some cases where you need to do that, where you need to actually fire off an event from from your script. So now what I want to do, instead of just having this alert clear items, is make this actually work, where we click clear and all of these go away. So what I want you guys to do is pause the video and see if you can do it and see how many different ways you can make that happen. Just from what we've learned so far, there's many ways you could do it. So just pause the video and see if you can do that. All right, so the easiest way would be to just take the, not the clear button, we need to have the unordered list. So we'll say query selector, and we'll select the unordered list. Actually, I'm going to put this in a variable. Let's say item list. Okay, now when it comes to setting these in variables, it's all preference. If you're just using it once in one function, then I mean, I would probably just use document query selector and not put it in a variable. If you're using it a bunch of times in your function, then do something like this. If you're using it a bunch of times in the script, then put it at the top, you know, in the global scope. But different people have different preferences. So what we could do is simply take that item list and set the inner HTML to nothing. That would be the easiest way to do this. Clear it. All right. It isn't the most performant, but you're not even going to notice a difference because it's such a simple task. So that's the first way of doing this. The second is to bring in the actual list items. So we'll say items, and we can set that to item list, and then use query selector all and select all of the list items. And then we could loop through the list items. So items dot, we could use a for each, and that's going to take in a function. We'll say for each item, then we want to do an item dot remove. Okay, so if I do that, I click clear, they're all going to go away. All right, and then the last way I want to show you is using a while loop, and I guess this is the most performant way to delete multiple items like this. So we'll say while. It's a way that I didn't really use before a little while ago. So we can say item list, and then we can use the first child property to just check to see if there's a first child. If there's a first child, that means that there's a list item. And then we can take the item list and use remove child. So let's say remove child, and then we can pass in the first child with item list dot first child. All right, so we're basically checking for the first LI. If it's there, then we're going to remove it, and it's going to do that until there's no more children. And that just fired off because of this. Let me just comment that out. Okay, so I click and they go away. All right, so that's it. In the next video, I want to start to look at some other mouse events other than just click.